Without further ado, allow me to welcome our very distinguished, eminent speaker of tonight, Mr. Bhavishya Garg. Mr. Garg is the head of user experience department at MX Player. He has created the world's first line of physical products for UX designers and researchers. He is the founder of the Niche Mind, which focuses on creating effective tools for UX and UI designers. He is also the founder and CEO at Let's Grow Business. He is here to share with us his expert opinion on the UX design career path. A very warm welcome to you, Mr. Garg. Honored to have you with us today. Handing the
Thank you,
session
Shama, for
over to you.
introducing me.
Please switch on your video.
My video is on. Can you see
Right.
it?
Yes. Please proceed, Mr. Garg.
All right. Thanks a lot, Shama, for introducing me. So welcome everyone to this info session. Thank you all for joining us today. Today, we are going to talk a lot about design industry. And one thing that designers absolutely love are their titles. There are just so many of them. And that often creates confusion among beginners, especially the ones who are just getting started in their design journey. Hence today, I'm going to share with you a complete spectrum of design titles as they exist in the industry today, and explain a little about each title so that it could help you map your own passion or interest to that title, and maybe you could consider pursuing your career in that. So this story, can everyone hear me, right?
Yes, absolutely. We can hear you all right, Mr. Garg.
All right. Got it. So this story starts down the memory lane in 1960s at the time of industrial designers, the designers who designed physical products like our favorite cars, our vacuum cleaners, or even something as small as a Pepsi can. Uh, the principles were still the same, right? Creating meaningful products, meaningful and effective experience for customers. And after that phase, we entered the dot-com phase in the economy. And the new type of design title was born, that was graphic design. So now graphic design, a lot of people here already may know about graphic design. Graphic design is really an umbrella term that covers various type of design work, from logos to brochures to packaging to marketing and so much more. At the highest level, graphic designers are responsible for creating 2D visual assets that effectively convey information. So if you're someone who is good at visuals, who likes to create beautiful things, who is good at digital art, you should definitely think about pursuing something in graphic design. As soon as we moved further away in the dot-com phase, we moved towards a visual design role. Now, visual design role is much similar to graphic design roles, quite interchangeable, but majorly the distinction is that visual design is the one that focuses entirely on how the complete product looks, and graphic designer usually entails into just certain parts of the product, not the complete product. So visual designers is majorly taking care of, let's say, the entire product. And then we went further ahead in the dot-com world, and we had a new title created, and that was web designer. Now, web designer is obviously a designer focused on designing websites. Web designers are typically tasked with creating high fidelity mockups or for web pages or for apps that developers can use in implementations. Now, when we started creating websites in 2004, 2003, this role become quite pivotal, because people now didn't just want the product, didn't just want the website, they wanted the website that looked good. And that's where the web designer was born. And very soon that web design role transitioned into something that we call today UI designer, user interface designer. So whereas user experience designer has the responsibility of owning the entire user experience, UI is concerned with the visual design components of a user experience. So how your website is going to look, how the complete design system of it, every element that you see on an app or a website is designed literally by hands by a UI designer. And we move further away from the UI design when the world matured further, and now users were not just expecting the websites that looked good, performed well, but they wanted a website that was so effective for their workflow that it didn't even waste a microsecond of the time that they didn't have. And that transitioned more into another role called user experience design. Now, user experience designers are concerned with overall user experience of a digital product. This is a broad role with a significant amount of responsibility. For instance, user experience designers typically perform tasks such as research, user interviews, information architecture definition, wireframing, and just creating visual and interaction design so that they can convey the right message to the developers and give, let's say, wireframes. A lot of UX designers have the resultant they give wireframes at the end of their process, which is taken then to a UI process. And this role, a lot of people were not comfortable with prototyping. They were only comfortable with the research part of the process. And that evolved into a new role named UX researcher. Now, UX researcher are people who could also be a psychology graduate who's entirely responsible for doing user research on ground, off ground, online, and gathering the right insights for the product. And that brings us down to the last category that generally exists in this spectrum is a product designer, a digital product designer. And up until the initial release of the product, the UX designer, product designer roles are identical. As soon as the product is released, UX designers typically move to another project, but product designers are entirely responsible for the growth of that product. They're entirely responsible for the end user experience, not just before the release, not just 1 month after the release, but consistently till the product exists. So that's the major difference that we see between a user experience designer and a product designer. And now, obviously, in the recent past, there are a lot of new roles that have come up. For example, information architect, the person who is entirely responsible for creating for making sure that people are able to find what they want on your website or your app. They arrange everything that there is to see on a website or an app. Then for example, another title could be a digital content strategist, people who don't want to prototype, don't want to do user research, but they're really, really good at communication. They're really, really good at English. Those people obviously could explore something in digital content strategists where they design the content that you see now in the apps. Obviously, for example, you would see in MX Player, you would see that every text that is in a pop-up or a screen is intentionally there and it's written so that it gives you the best experience of the product. So that is another role that has branched out from all of these. But this is majorly the spectrum that we have seen in the digital product design space. And this is how it has evolved from starting in the dot-com bubble from graphic design to something as mature and as specific as a user experience researcher or a content strategist. So I hope we laid down some good boilerplate for our session today for product design and user experience. And maybe this could help everyone understand a bit about where their interest lies and where they want to pursue their career. So I think this is really it about what I wanted to introduce to everyone so that we are ready for today's session.
Right, Mr. Bhatta. Thank you so much for that. Now, for the next part of the session, please allow me to welcome our very favorite, renowned speaker, Professor Pinkesh Shah. He is a senior faculty, director of programs at the Institute of Product Leadership, and was most recently the Global VP of Product Management at McAfee. Kindly take the session forward, Professor Shah.
Oh, super. Well, it's kind of hard to do this when the expert has already given the expertise in a nutshell. And I really liked the way you classified this, Bhavishya. I think this will give a lot of guidance to a lot of folks who may be confused, not just between these terms UI and UX, but also the flavors of the rainbow, the different colors of the rainbow, which exist as a title when they look for that career transition as well. So I think I'm sure that was very, very useful. What I'll try to share is a few tips and really open it up for more questions so that we can address what's on your mind and that way we know what's important to you. There's a lot to talk about. Design is obviously one of the hottest skills on the planet right now, everywhere, not just India, but in the United States as well. It's one of the probably the most progressive skill, highly sought after career paths. And the reason this has become all of a sudden important, not because design was not important 10 years ago, but in the context of today's world, design is becoming the new differentiator. Perhaps 10 years ago, the more bells and whistles you add to the product, perhaps the more feature capabilities you add was the differentiator. In today's world, thanks to Apple, but also beyond Apple, thanks to a bunch of products and services which have now educated the users, trained all of us as consumers to say, look, design is very, very important. In fact, is a deciding factor whether I will go with this product or that product, as well. So, and hence this is becoming a lot more important. I'm gonna share my screen here real quick and walk you through what I would call three specific career tips. Again, having hired a lot of product designers, having worked with a lot of design teams as a global VP of product in McAfee, and before that with IBM, we've always seen how you interlock with designers, even though you're not a designer. And I think this is where the product management and the design skills are kind of getting fused as well, right? So, but first, rapid fire. I think those who are looking to grow within the career, to impress your manager, to get a promotion, or outside looking for a different role in a different company, make sure that you're really looking at all three lenses, right? And you're prepared for all three lenses. Knowing how to prototype is a functional skill, but how to present that prototype and tell a story around it is a leadership skill. And I think without both together, you are at a significant disadvantage, right? So don't ignore the left and the right as you focus on the functional skill. In this case, design is the role that we're discussing today. So the functional skills of design, like what Bhavishya mentioned, would be very, very important. But again, don't forget the left and the right to that, because your leadership skills, your ability to conflict manage, your ability to present, your ability to tell a story is equally crucial, if not more, right? And then on the right side, you have the domain skills. Do you understand enough about that domain? Design, a designer is a transferable skill. Once you've designed, once you're a user experience designer at Microsoft, you can easily shift to Bosch in some sense. However, understanding manufacturing domain, to be able to then understand the customer of that domain, to be then able to understand how to present and build a UI or a UX that will excite and delight that customer is crucial. Hence, domain understanding is equally important. Number two, I think stop growing within a what I call a utility stack, right? So if you're a graphics designer, there's only so much that you can now uncover as a graphics designer. If you're a user researcher, there's only so much that you can actually progress there. What you hence need to look at is to evolve yourself from a utility player to a full stack professional, right? And when we say full stack, this is what we mean for product careers, right? Where we have multiple different types of inbound product management, outbound product management, right? Figuring out how to market the product. Similarly, for the design perspective, I think Bhavishya already explained this in a very eloquent way. Right from the problem side of how you solve problems, how do you focus on more on the problems, all the way to focusing more on the solutions. There's a whole spectrum of roles, right? But it's important to stretch your canvas. A utility player only does one thing and does it well, and that's important. I'm not suggesting that you should not be good at something, but you absolutely need to be cross-functional. You need to become a full stack professional, is I think the new trend, and it's high in demand, right? If you are a designer, but you can also sit down with a product manager and talk finance, you are invaluable, right? If you are a visual designer and you have a great knack of creating great prototypes with great visual elements and colors and fonts and iconography, but at the same time, if you can also speak to the marketing teams and understand how they acquire customers and how your UI and your UX is going to help them achieve their customer acquisition goals, you are invaluable, right? And so full stack professional is absolutely important, as opposed to becoming a utility profession. And in the context of full stack of design, this is what we define as a full stack designer. You not only have the best skills and competencies under UX design, right, which is essentially the interaction, as Bhavishya explained eloquently. You also need to have all the elements of UI design, which is the whole, high fidelity, low fidelity prototyping, wireframing. You have to have a lot of that focus of product design, uh, which I think Bhavishya also talked about. And finally, the business design. I think business design is also important, because if you don't know how something is going to get monetized, if you don't know how revenue is going to get generated, you may not be an expert in finance. You may not know how to run P&L statements in financial language. That's okay. You need to at least have the orientation to be able to sit with your finance team and explain why your dynamic pricing in Uber is going to show you a different price point, and how is that's going to impact revenue, which is, even though it's a design problem, it's actually a revenue problem to solve, right? And so that's gonna my second tip. And my last tip, and then we'll open up for questions, and maybe talk a little bit about the programs if that's of interest to folks, is go beyond literacy. I'm going to use a word that I hope all of you can do a Google search on it, if you haven't heard this, and learn and read, go a little deeper. The word is called cognitive bias, right? And simply put, cognitive bias is a feeling of who we are, who we think who we are, who we really are not, right? And so it's a little confusing. So let me try again with an example. So I think I'm Shah Rukh Khan. Actually, no, with my long hair, I think I am now Arijit Singh. Except that when I start singing, the reality comes back very quickly, saying nowhere close, right? And so I may think who I am is not necessarily who you are, right? And that bias, that blind spot, is the number one career killer. So just because you have an opinion, you don't become a UI expert. Is kind of what Paul Heckel is talking about, right? And if in fact, the mantra here is knowing is not the same as having the skill for it, right? Having literacy is one thing. I can have a conversation. I know the buzzwords. I know Gestalt's law. I know all these, interesting things about UX and UI design, but I may not have the skill. So ask this hard question to yourself. Do I have literacy in certain areas, or do I actually have the skill? Because skill means you can solve any problem at any point in time, and you have demonstrable proof to be able to do it, right? So that's kind of very, very crucial. 4 layers of learning. I'm sure you guys have seen this before, but if not, again, a very important thing, outer layer is awareness. Learning about Chinese cooking all the way to data science, all the way to design, can happen online. There are hundreds of great YouTube videos that will actually allow you to learn, but that will give you awareness. The second step is literacy. Usually people do certifications, workshops, 2-day, 3-day. Now you're a little bit more aware. You can construct sentences, you can have conversations, but skills is where you need to get deep enough to be able to say, okay, this is the problem, this is my version, this is how I'm going to solve it, and I'm going to now convince people around me this is the best way, or the best recommendation. That problem solving ability to demonstrate your knowledge, ability to apply that, is really skill, right? And so that's kind of where your goal ought to be, not at the superficial layer of awareness, right? And so with that, I'm going to pause. That's my email. Happy to connect on LinkedIn as well. But I'll turn it back to the IPL team in Bangalore, and see if you guys have any questions that we can answer. Happy to take a few.
Yes, thank you, Professor Shah. We do have a lot of questions. And audience, you can go ahead and ask your questions in the Q&A window, or you can raise your hand and I shall unmute you for asking the questions. But for now, let's take a question from Dia. She asks us, do I need to learn how to code or program to be a UX designer?
So I'll take this.
I'll let Bhavishya answer. Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So I could speak from a personal experience. I myself am head of UX at MX Player, and I do not need coding. But one thing I would say is that it always helps knowing a bit about coding, because it always helps to know what's the limit of developers, what's the limit of what you can create. But apart from that, even if you know, even if you sit a lot with your developer friends, you would know enough to predict that. So you really don't know, you really don't need to know coding.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Garg. Now
My-
we have Rajat asking a question, saying that is there an age or am I too old to get into the UX career path? I mean, is there an age profile needed to get into UX career path?
You know, I am probably a lot more older than Bhavishya, and I'm sure some people are a lot more older than me, and I think the range is pretty open. I don't think there is a time
Right.
or an age limit. I think it's a question of your passion, your ability, and this is the key thing, your ability to invest time, energy, resources, money to build that skill is really the only function, is really the only prerequisite. I don't think this even requires a degree. I think you could be, you know, a graduate, you could not even finished high school. We have enough and more examples of that all around the world, where this is one area, unlike maybe pure finance or unlike supply chain, where you need to go through a complicated, rigorous set of training before you get started. Um, any kind of lightweight skill building also can get you started, I think, in this space. Of course, learning is learning. The more you do is always better. But I don't think there is one. Bhavisha, any
I
real
agree. I mean, all of my doctor friends are absolutely jealous of me because I started earning when I was 19. Because design is really the only thing that all you need to do is, all you require really is a laptop, and you could learn everything that there is about design. And that really you can't do with medical science. And that puts us to an advantage. And I'm sure with institutes like IPL, people are leveraging that quite a lot, especially now in the times of Corona.
You know, I think whether you're just starting out or whether you have 15 years of experience, the point is your internal clarity of why you want to learn design, your ability, like I said, to invest time, energy, resources to learn it are the only two questions that I think you need to answer. The industry is pretty kind as well. Now, I have to be honest. Um, if you have 15 years of experience and you're expecting a lot of salary at equivalent to that 15 years of experience of being a project manager and automatically jumping into, let's say, a user experience designer with 0 years of experience, now that's going to create a mismatch in some sense, right? Because somebody who's not expecting so much at perhaps 2 years of experience, who has enough UX experience as you, but you have 15 years of experience, you may find sometimes an imbalance. But the good news is, depends on where you come from, the average pay for a designer is so high, right? And I don't know, Bhavishya, if you want to talk a little bit about, maybe let some secrets out in terms of the pay scales and all. But the average product and design thing is so high that even if you compare your 10 plus years of experience salary, usually it's matched up with just 2 years of experience in UX or product, right? And so that allows you to make that shift without taking the financial hit as well, especially when you have lots of years of experience.
Thank you, Professor Shah. We have quite a few questions lined up, so we'll get to that. Praveen Sinha asks us, I have an experience of 9 years in fashion design from NIFT. Does my experience count or have to be considered as a fresher?
I'm sorry, I missed the question. From 9 years, what exactly did he do?
He is a fashion designer
All
from
right.
NIFT, the National Institute of Fashion Technology. So he has 9 years experience in that, and he wants to know if he would be considered as a fresher when he enters into this career path, or does his experience count?
Uh, in my experience, if they choose a role that is more pertinent to his experience, for example, user experience in a fashion retail startup, then obviously his experience as a fashion designer could count. But otherwise, in my experience, if you switch lanes, if you are new to the UX design career, you're often considered beginner. If Pinkesh has any other opinion.
No, I think so remember it goes back to three things we talked about, right? Your leadership bubble, your functional skills bubble, and your domain bubble. Now, if you come from the fashion industry, your domain bubble is going to be highly relevant to become a UX designer at Myntra, let's say,
Right.
right? Because they are dealing in that domain. Um, Now, you may be scored less on your functional skills because you don't have relevant experience of doing UX design. So you may score, let's say, 6 out of 10, even though you have the best, you know, skill training and portfolio to show. But with the right aggregate score of leadership, functional, and domain, you can still make that transition, fairly frictionless, fairly seamlessly. So my recommendation is make a shift into design, into UX design, product design in a similar fashion, company. At least you will have an edge. And then next time, after that first jump, you can now become a UX designer at Microsoft, let's say, right? Because you're already a UX designer in Myntra, and now you're kind of keeping everything else constant. You're shifting the domain. So make two short jumps as opposed to one long jump would be how I would do it, if I were you.
Right. Further to that, Professor Shah, I think it will be on the same lines. Ashish Anand asks us, I would like to know how to transition to a product design role.
So that depends on how you describe the product design role. Do you want to get into the physical product design or digital product design? For both, the paths are different, I would say. So assuming that you are talking about digital product design, again, we have to understand your background. Are you graduate? How many years of experience do you have? But generally, a way to get started in product design is not straightforward. Most product designers, they happen to be UI UX designer first. They happen to actually do all the design by themselves, learn everything about what product design is, and then graduate to a product design role where they could actually handle a complete product and its design end to end.
So I'm gonna try and share the screen, which talks a little bit about the skills and kind of gives a little bit more detailed version of the answer that Bhavishya gave. Let's see if I can do this. Oops. Yeah. So, so if you look at it now, as you move into a design career, there are five kind of core pillars and skills. Now, if I peel the onion and give you more prescriptive guidance, right? While I and Bhavishya have kind of broadly talked about certain things, um, there's a team of experts, Bhavishya, who's also one of the coaches for this particular program. There's a team of experts who've put together a curriculum that we believe allows one in the fastest possible way to make that shift and to grow into a design career, right? And if you ask the reverse question, then what is the industry looking for? These are the five pillars that emerge out, right? So I would say a prescriptive way to answer your question would be these set of five core skills would allow you to be to make that transition most predictable way, in the most seamless way, right? And a lot of this information is also on the website, on the program page, so I encourage you to take a look at it as well. But I'll put it on the screen so that you can look at it and others can look at it, and then may have more questions around it.
Yes, let's take our next question, Professor Shah. It's a very interesting one. Sagar asks us why job postings for UX designers ask for HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and most of UI stuff. Many of non-UI people like me gets rejected at the first place.
Yeah,
I would say it's just about the awareness
yeah.
of the
Go ahead,
hiring
Bhavish. Yeah,
manager.
yeah, yeah.
So it
Go ahead.
usually people who hiring managers, especially who don't really know in detail about what really user experience design consists of, they often make this mistake, and it's easy to discard them as stupid. But this is really the state that we are in right now. We are not entirely educated as an industry, and it's taking time, and that's the reason you would see such job descriptions. And I would urge you to not reply, or maybe talk to such hiring managers and consult with them if they really mean what they wrote in the job description.
Right. We have
No,
a lot of
I think,
questions. I'm sorry. Yes.
yeah, I was just going to add something to that, if we have a quick, minute. So this whole UX versus UI has been an interesting debate now for a long time, and I don't think this debate is going anywhere. More so than the debate, there is a lot of confusion, as if these two are synonymous or as if these two are the same thing, which they're clearly not, right? And I think there's a pedigree of people who understand that. Um, but I also tell you the practical reality on the ground. Again, trying to be a little bit more, giving you a slightly bleak picture, but a practical picture. Because there is a lack of maturity, either because of the size of the company or because of the functional leader itself, the hiring manager, like Bhavishya said itself, you often want the same person to do multiple things, right? Just to kind of get better efficiency, financial efficiency, not real efficiency, but financial efficiency. So in that context, instead, you have two choices. One is to fight with this system, saying, hey, you know what, you guys don't know what you're doing. um, you're asking for all the wrong things. I'm going to move away from this and find my own corner, find my own place where they are appreciating for who I am, is one approach. The second approach is have so much within you that no matter who that so-called ignorant hiring manager or HR manager is, you still emerge out as an awesome candidate. Now, it's a choice. Now, this is where individual choices and individual decisions will have to be made. I think, this is just my personal opinion, not of that of the institute, not of that of anybody else, and it might be slightly different than other experts in the industry, is this is where full stack word becomes even more sense. Why should I not know something that is expected of me in the long run? Even if today you don't know, let's say, UI design, knowing UI design will enable you to do a better interlock with a UI designer, right? Not just in this role, but let's say 3 years down the road, 2 years down the road, you become a senior director, VP. So I think instead of fighting the system and trying to, remove this friction in the world, which is a very, very big task, and trust me, people like Bhavishya and many other experts are working on it tirelessly, right? I think as a selfish advice for you that I could give you is, don't fight the system, develop a more cylindrical skills that no matter what the customer is asking in the restaurant, your menu seems to have a yes to it, right? Especially in these four areas: UX, UI, product, and business. And that is the real essence, in my opinion, of a full stack designer. And I think it gives you immunity towards all these irrational behaviors that you may see in the system. Would be my parting thought.
Right, Professor Shah. We have a question saying how many tools are going to be taught in this program? And also related to that, we have a question saying what career paths exist in UX designers?
So I think there was a slide here somewhere that here. So there are a bunch of tools. But again, trust me, it's not just about tools. There are enough and plenty tools that will be covered, right from Figma to Balsamic to InVision. But I think the knowledge of tool versus the application of that tool in the context of the problem, focus more on the second, right? if you know what needs to be done, why it needs to be done, for who it needs to be done, in what context it needs to be done, a tool is simply is like a brush, right? So you need to know what you want to paint. If I use that analogy as a painter, today you are using one brush, tomorrow you may be using an orange brush, but that does not change, and that has a very little impact on what you draw, how you draw, and how that masterpiece Mona Lisa is going to come out, right? So I think short answer is lots of tools, what you see here on the screen, and couple others, and it'll be hands-on. All of this is very hands-on, because nothing in our view, unless you are doing learning by doing, it is not learning, right? It's all about project-based learning. So you will actually be working on a real prototype of a real startup for a real company, and going through these iterations, presenting it back to coaches. Coaches now give you feedback. Again, you reincorporate it. Now this becomes a portfolio. So not only it allows you to learn by doing, at the end of the learning module, you now have a demonstrable portfolio that you can publish on the web and tell people about why you are the best UX designer, UI designer, product designer, full stack designer. So that is an important outcome as well. It's not just the tools, it's building your portfolio to demonstrate and prove to the hiring manager, not just the resume. Of course, everybody has a great resume, and resumes always have this wonderful keyword stuffing. So all the right keywords are going to be there in every resume. I don't think that really cuts it. I think they want to see your portfolio. I think they want to see what you've done. Even if you've not done this at work, you're a developer. So obviously you've not done any UX design. Let's say you're a business analyst. Let's say you're a sales and a marketing professional. Even if you've not done this at work, have you done this as part of your learning? They want to see that portfolio, right? Maybe Bhavisha, you can talk a little bit about how you would hire.
No, I absolutely agree with that. I mean, this is how usually things happen. It's entirely about the project-based learning, and you need to learn by doing. The design is one of the only fields where, irrespective of where you are, even if you are a fashion designer or you're a developer, you could come back home at the night and actually work on your design skills, maybe create a portfolio of 3 to 4 apps, 2 websites, and you'll get a job definitely within 2 months if you have a portfolio that actually stands out. So this is really the path to progression that I see in design careers, and it's entirely based on you have to practice more so that you could do more.
Right. Mr. Gar, you can take this next question as well. We have Anil asking us, what are the 3 most important skills in a UX designer?
So number one most important skill that you need to have is user research. Now that user research could be done on ground, online, or that user research could be done in form of data analytics, where you are actually just reading data, but analyzing the user behavior from it. And user research is one of the most important parts of user experience as a user experience designer. The second one I would say would be separately taking it outside as interviews. So not just interviewing relevant users, but interviewing the stakeholders in understanding the right vision and mission of the product. So your interviewing skills must be extremely important. And at the last, I would say your information architecture skill, or I would say visual design skill also. The user experience designer currently in the industry can't really survive, especially in India, I would say, with just knowledge of research and psychology. They also really need to know the UI part of it, and they need to know what will fit right and which wireframes will actually turn out into a really good product. So that really would be the 3 things that I consider most important: the user research, second would be the interviewing, and third would be visual design, and then maybe later information architecture.
Right. Professor Shah, would you like to add on to this?
No, I think I think that core set of 5 pillars that we talked about, I think would be my prescriptive answer to this. I don't know if I want to prioritize again within those 5, because it'll kind of reduce down to very small, and it will give you this feeling that, okay, if I just do this 1, 2, or 3, I will become a great designer. I think I think it takes a little bit of time, effort to go from this intuitive way of thinking, right? While every one of us is creative. There was a question on, do you have to be creative, by the way, on the chat window that I saw. And my answer is yes, but my answer is also every one of us is creative. I think we're creative perhaps in different ways. Perhaps that creativity hasn't had a avenue to be expressed. Perhaps that creativity has not have had the vocabulary to come out and express in. um, Figuring out a business model on how to make money without charging and by giving away free, products to people is also creativity. It did not require any colors, it did not require any fonts, and it did not require any screens. So I think the word creative should not be boxed too narrowly into colors, fonts, iconography, drawing pictures, and all of that, right? Of course that also requires high degree of creativity, but creativity is absolutely a must. But the good news is that everyone has it. uh, so I don't think you should be afraid of, just because you cannot draw, that I cannot become a great UX designer, for example. I know that's not the question he was asking, but I'm just extrapolating that. I think every one of us have enough creativity to become an awesome, designer. Now you may specialize within the 5 buckets. You may feel, okay, you know what, I'm really good at user research and I want to go deeper. While I know a little bit of visual design, while I know a little bit of information architecture, while I know a little bit of everything else, I want to go deeper. That's great. Nothing wrong with that, right? So but don't confuse that with somehow you have to be an artist to become a product designer. You do not. Most people do not know how to sketch, by the way, right? And if you ask them to draw a line with a pencil, they can't even draw a straight line. But they become awesome designers, because it's the context of the customer, it's the business context, it's the innovation context that matters more. Yeah.
We'll take the next question from Dipra Ghosh. How to do user research, conduct usability testing remotely in this pandemic situation? I'm not sure if I got that right. I'll repeat it. How to do
Yeah.
user research, conduct usability testing remotely in this pandemic situation?
Right. So I
Pravisha,
believe we have a link that someone has shared it within the chat group, and that will take you to all the online tools that are available, and even a normal Google search of UX design tools would do. And there are so many tools, including Lookback, userinterviews.com, that we use daily, even something as basic as Google Sheets and Google Interviews, Meet, Hangouts that we use daily for interviewing different users would suffice you to schedule and conduct your user interviews remotely. All you need to do is just try a little harder. Especially for international products, the user research has always been remote. For example, I'm today sitting in Mumbai creating product for all around the world. Let's say Mexico, and I obviously can't go to Mexico physically. And these tools have always been has always existed, and nothing really has changed. If you really want to go out and do user research, you can obviously take all the protection and do so. But if you want to do it online, there are ample of myriad of ways that you could schedule your user interviews and user research online. Now, obviously, this would take some amount of money. No, you might need to pay to the participants, you might need to pay to software, but you would need that little budget to get started with UX. That being said, you can get it done basically anywhere.
Thank you, Mr. Garg. Let's take the next question from Ashish Anand. Professor Shah, you can help answer this. Does the EMBA program also have some elements of the ICUX program?
It does. So for those who are not familiar with these terms, and again, I don't know all the details about all the programs. Certainly go to the website and spend some time. But I'm closely associated in terms of facilitating and teaching in the executive program, which is an 18-month program that runs in multiple campuses around the world on weekends. And that program is designed more for, I would say that the 7+ years, the higher years of experience, who are already successful in their own way, but now want to build out their leadership potential. Design is an absolutely critical course in semester 1 and semester 2 of that program, right? Because we believe that every business leader, if you want to really become an awesome product leader, you have to know design. You have to have appreciation for design. You may not want to become a designer in terms of your own job, profession, or title, um, but you need to have that element. Otherwise, you will be at a disadvantage, right? So yes, short answer is the modules of ICUX have been taught for the last 7 years already in the executive program. The reason the ICUX was created to kind of go back and reflect upon the board's view on how this whole idea came about was there are a lot of people who don't want to go through this 18-month long, holistic program in management. They want to kind of laser focus their outcomes as a full stack designer, which has elements of product design, business design, but goes much deeper in a more compact fashion, faster, ROI, if you will, faster time to finish. And that's where the focused, concentrated program, if you will, is the ICUX. But ICUX is also available. The modules are also integrated in the overall bigger program. So short answer is yes.
Let's take a next question from Rajesh. How do you balance business needs and technical restrictions with good design?
In my experience, the only way to do that is to stay in close touch with the top stakeholders, and that usually happens when you're in a smaller startup. If you're in a big company like Microsoft, obviously you can't directly talk to Sundar, directly talk to Satya Nadella, right? But especially when you're in a smaller startup in a smaller setting, you should directly speak to I'm sorry, you should directly speak to the CEO or directly speak to the founder of the company and understand their mission, understand where the company is going, and really take your product design and use it as a vehicle to take them there. And this is how you can, by continuously talking to them, continuously understanding what they are doing in the business terms, and what their entire aim with the company is.
I think this goes back to just kind of reaffirming what Bhavishya has been saying earlier as well. And what I shared with all of you as, the leadership skill circle, the functional skill, and the domain skill. I think at the end of the day, that's the summary of what you ought to be looking at, right? Because functional skills, which is all the modules and everything we've discussed, kind of falls into the design skills under the functional bubble. But the leadership skills, like Bhavishya was saying, talking to cross-functional stakeholders, convincing them, telling a great story. A lot of people have a lot of data, but you cannot tell a great story. Now that's a limitation. It's nothing to do with design. That skill is very important to designers, but it's important to every business professional, right? And so it's a must. It's almost like salt. It's a basic ingredient in no matter what kind of cooking you are into today. So in some sense, hence that full stack makes more sense. Even though you may be an expert in one or two, I would say don't take a very narrow path to your career, right? Broaden this out a little bit so that you grow much faster. Otherwise, you'll get in the role. That's not the problem. Job market is hot. Everybody's looking for a product designer. You will get a role in a jiffy. But now, how will you grow in that career ladder is also important, right? Otherwise, you'll again get stuck, and you don't want to go back again and again and reinvest in time, money, energy in learning, right? I mean, of course, continuous learning is good, but you can't afford to just go do this every single time. It's very disruptive to life as well, especially if you are a working professional. So pick something that is kind of a little bit more middle path, not too thorough, not too superfluous, and something that gives you a solid skill base.
Right, Professor Shah. We have Diksha asking us that she's already a designer. How will the program help her?
Like I said, Diksha, you may already be in the career path, right? But how do you now grow and accelerate further, right? Many companies now in the last 7 years or so have a chief design officer role. This was not the case 15 years ago, right? All you could do is become a great designer, and then you eventually report up into product management, you report up into engineering, you report up into somewhere. Now there is a whole C-level audience, a C-level role. That's the importance of design. Guess what? The guy who becomes, the gal who becomes the CTO, the chief technology officer, is not the one who's the most technically savvy person. The guy who becomes the CEO is not the most savvy financial, or salesperson, but he or she has enough cross-functional skills. While they're a specialist in one, they know how to interact and interlock with other functions. And I think if you are already a designer, this is great news. You are, by the way, in the top 1 percentile of the world's population, because very few designers exist in this world, right? Good ones especially, and I'm sure you are a good one. So you are already good. Now the question is, how do you go from that good to great, right? How do you now move up quickly? And so the program will now give you structure. The program will give you methodologies. The program will allow you to develop your leadership skills in the context of presentations. How do you convince? And so I think that kind of rounds off. One of the other interesting things that I'm not sure if somebody has shared this with you is that if you look at the actual, so let me come back to that screen real quick. And if you look back at that curriculum, these 5 modules, you see the ones in yellow. And the reason they're in yellow is because they're optional and you can skip them. So if you are already a designer, and let's say you join this program, you don't need to finish 5 months, because there's no point in repeating things for you when you already have proficiency on it. So at this point, you take a proficiency test. So let's say you're enrolled in the program and you say, look, I challenge the module number 1 in the sense that I don't want to go through this because I know enough. So now you take a challenge, a proficiency test, present it in front of skill mentors and experts like Bhavishya, and if they find that you've done well, you are now skipping that module, right? So now instead of that basic module, you're doing more advanced stuff. So the model of the program is also flexible enough to adjust to your learning path. So instead of finishing in 5 months, you are now finishing it in 3 because you've already skipped all the optional modules because you already know them, right? Or you can supplement and replace those basic modules with a lot more advanced modules. I don't know if they have the electives listed here, but they must be listed somewhere on the website. So take a look at that, and that could be another way for you to have an experiential way of building your skills in advanced areas. So that's what I would say. Would be my advice for you. I know, Bhavishya, you had some other thoughts as well, right?
No, I mean, I'm still thinking about the 3 pillars that you gave us, and that really summarizes everything: functional, leadership, and domain. And that's really I would say is the conclusion of everything here.
Right. With just a few more minutes to go, but we have a lot of questions. We'll take one more question, Professor Shah and Mr. Garg. Mr. Garg, you could help answer this question. This is from Praveen Sinha asking us, what is product design in context to Amazon website? Is it some features or the whole website?
So product design in context of Amazon, let's take an example of Amazon. Amazon has a lot of product designers. And let's say one product designer will be focusing entirely on, let's say, Amazon Launchpad. So someone would have given him a brief about what the Amazon Launchpad is going to be. And he planned the entire product, planned its launch, planned its design. And then after the launch, they continuously improve that product. So this is what a product designer generally does. They work on a specific project, a specific product. Now, often in case of startups, product designers work on multiple products at once. But in a nutshell, this is what really is. Product design is the one which designs the experience to make sure that they have the most, it has the most delightful user experience, at the same time weighing in the business goals that needs to be weighed in, and make sure that the product is going in the right direction. So this
Right.
often also overlaps with the product managers in a lot of companies. So there is often a confusion between those two. But product designers majorly is a role that is entirely focused on design. It's doing everything that it's doing from a user research, user centricity perspective, and product manager is doing from a management and the company perspective.
Professor Shah, would you like to add?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that was a very good way of detailing this out. I think a simple summary way of looking at this also is look at Amazon and Amazon Prime. Now, Amazon Prime is a product within the system of Amazon that leverages multiple properties or multiple products, right? So a designer may focus on horizontal, making sure that the menus and architectures and brand and colors and the user enrollments and all of that is streamlined. But if you're a product designer, how does Amazon Prime cut through every different aspect of Amazon, right from giving free music, which is part of the Prime membership, and video, all the way to faster delivery, all the way to connecting to some other capabilities of an existing product or an existing system. As a product designer, you need to have the end-to-end understanding of why that product is even important, what is the monetization, what are the value proposition, what is the competitive analysis looks like, so that you can design in the right contextual way, right? So it's nothing but a designer, but your lens changes a little bit, right? Because you have the focus of Amazon Prime as my key thing now, right? Would be another example of looking at this.
Yes. Thank you, Professor Shah. Thank you, Mr. Garg. Uh, Design career is not a subject that you can get answers to within an hour. We totally understand that. Audience has a lot of questions pertaining to the program, but we'll have to cut short this session due to time constraints. So thank you everyone for joining in and making this session a huge success. A special thanks to Mr. Garg and Professor Shah for sharing valuable career guidance, which is definite to mold the career paths. Professor Shah, would you like to
Ab-
say something?
No, no,
Thank you for
absolutely. I think
inviting
it's a
me.
pleasure
Right.
always to interact with aspiring designers, and it's not just designers who are going to be design professionals in title. A designer, a product manager also needs to know design skills. A business analyst, a project manager also needs to have design skills. And so I think look at design skills as the focus, not just a job title of a UX designer, right? While that is going to happen automatically for those who have the skills, it's a little broader than just getting a job role would be my recommendation. Second is, like I said, focus on skills. Don't stop at literacy. Don't stop at buzzwords. Don't stop at certificates, online learning. All these are great tools, but they do not often generate skills. So invest time, energy into building skills, and don't stop at just literacy, I think would be my second parting thought. But have a great evening there. I know many of you, it's kind of late there. It's beautiful morning here for me, in US, but it must be getting late. So have a great evening, and happy to answer some of these questions on LinkedIn if we couldn't answer them here, or feel free to set up some time. I or Bhavishya are happy to take on a quick 10-minute, 15-minute call, understanding your perspective, your personal situation, where you are, and kind of giving you more pointed guidance once we know a little bit about you, right? So happy to do so.